Welcome back, everyone. Wanted to give you some information today about a diesel heater installation I did a couple years ago. I've had some time to work with it, and although I haven't taken it out on any trips yet, we have had temperatures down, well, at least down to 0 here that I've camped out in. I've used my rooftop tent that I've shown you in previous videos, and this heater really does a good job of keeping it warm, even considering the fact that it's not an insulated tent. So I wanted to give you a run through of what I did and why I did it this way, and we'll show you how it works and what the process is. So this is the diesel heater. What I did, I've got one of these Aluboxes that I used as a case for it. And what we have on both sides, I've got one of these end gates that allows you to put a 3-inch duct on here. So I drilled out a 3-inch center hole using a hole saw here, and then drilled out the individual holes to mount it. Then I've got one piece on the outside and one piece on the inside, along with some silicone around the outside just to make it a little more watertight. So obviously this sits outside of the tent when it's running, so it was necessary to make it capable of handling the weather. Over here we have 2 electric connectors. This one is an Anderson plug. That's where the primary power gets into the heater. So obviously diesel heaters do require an igniter. And then they've got the electronics that keep the thing operational. So that's where primary power comes in. Then here I used a 4-flat trailer plug. There we go. So I used that to give me the ability to connect and disconnect my thermostat and controller that also goes up inside the tent. So those are the 2 electrical hookups that we have here. Down here on this end, because this is a burner, the diesel heater obviously uses diesel fuel to produce fire. So this is your air inlet for the heater itself. So it allows me to keep the combustion air completely separate from the air that's being piped into the tent. Then over on this side, this is a marine through-the-hull diesel exhaust. I suppose it doesn't have to be for diesel, it would work for anything as far as I can tell. But the nice part about these is they're designed to be completely watertight. There's a gasket in behind here that can handle the heat of the exhaust. And by putting it on this side, it means that, again, my airflow over here and on the other end here don't get affected at all by the exhaust coming out that side over there. So, inside, I covered the entire inside of this with Dynamat. I did that because I remember hearing from a lot of people that the fuel pumps have a tendency to be kind of noisy, and I didn't want to spend all the money to get my hands on the ultra quiet design. I was trying to keep my price down a little bit if I could. But the point was, I wanted this to be a little bit quieter. Initially I had it sitting up on top of a tailgate rack on my Grand Cherokee when the rooftop tent was mounted on there. Now I leave it sitting on the ground when I'm using it with the tent mounted on the trailer. So it's actually a little bit quieter where it sits now, which is kind of nice. So this is my output duct right here. I just store it in there to make it easy to find. This is a Planar 44D diesel heater. So I've done a few modifications to it. Let's show you what we have here. So as you can see down on this side, I've got the outflow duct. It runs around and down. And if you can see it down in here, there's the inside of that gate that I had from the outside. So if we loosen this up, sorry for the wind noise, and we can slide the gate open, there we go. That then opens this up, so you've got direct access, and I can put my exit duct on here and attach the hose clamp just to keep it tight. Down in the bottom here, you can see it kind of running across the bottom, I think. Right down in there, where I'm pointing, is the inlet air for the combustion chamber. it connects up underneath the heater. So what I did, I put this on, about a 2-inch standoff. So it keeps it 2 inches above the bottom of the box, which gives me the ability to run both the fuel line, the intake air, and the exhaust out through that position. And I didn't have to drill holes in the bottom of the box except the ones that are used to mount this whole thing. So as you can see, it's not terribly solid, but it's good enough because I don't run this when I'm driving. I just run it when I'm sitting still. So over here, this is our exhaust. So it's a flexible exhaust pipe. Down here in the bottom is the muffler. You can see that in there. Hope so. And then I went ahead and insulated this as well, just to kind of keep the heat down in here as much as I possibly could. Obviously the thing is a burner and it's not heavily insulated, so it does warm up the inside of this box, but I didn't want to get too much direct heat right next to where I've got this plastic fuel tank. So the fuel tank is not the one that came with the heater. It had one that was smaller than this and more square and oblong. So it would have been shorter than this, wider than this, and about the same length. But I wanted to be able to put a heater, I wanted to be able to put the fuel tank in here with the heater so I could close the box and not have to worry about it. So this one holds about 2.5 gallons. And from my experience with it, even in temperatures down to about 15 degrees outside, this will run for about 3 nights at that level. If it's warmer out, like 25, 30 Fahrenheit, then it has the ability to go for up to a week on a full tank in here. So it's kind of nice. It means I don't use a whole lot of fuel for it, and if I carry like a 2-gallon Rotopack with diesel fuel in it, then I've got enough to double up my range, so I can do at least a couple weeks of camping like that without having to worry about refilling the fuel. So down in here, the other thing we have is all the electronics. So here you can see the inside of that 4-flat connector. Let me get that off of there. So this is the inside, and what that has is my connection to the wiring harness here that gives me control of the unit. So on the other side, we've got this harness. So this isn't the control head that the heater came with. This one is a little bit more expensive, has a few more features to it. This gives me the ability to potentially use this as a thermometer inside the tent, giving me the ability to cycle this. Now what I've found is, because of the way I use this, I don't like cycling the heater. I like having it set on a power output, not a temperature maintenance. What I've noticed with this particular heater brand, if you have it set to maintain a temperature, then it will cycle the heater, which is fine, except because I'm drawing in outside air, when it goes to shut off the burner, it's then going to draw cold air through the heater and dump it into the tent. Then when it fires up again, it runs a quick check of the blowers to make sure everything's working properly, which means yet again it pulls cold air through the heater and exhausts it into the tent. So I do have the ductwork to be able to put 2 pipes into the tent, an intake and an outflow, but so far I haven't done that. So because of it, I like to keep the thing running at a power level, which keeps it running continuously through the night. What I find is temperatures down to about 20 Fahrenheit, without a sleeping bag, I can sleep comfortably on the lowest setting for this heater. So it doesn't take a lot of fuel, and it runs pretty quiet over the course of the night. But getting back to the controls, as you can see on the other side here, we have the other half of our 4-flat. So this runs down and connects over here to this piece, and then this one gives me control of the heater up inside. So let me get this hooked up and I'll show you what it looks like when it's ready to use. There we go. So now we're all set up and ready to function. So what you can see down here, I've got my 2 electrical connections hooked up. So this is my primary power coming in, hooked up to the Anderson plug. Over here, this is my control. And if we go all the way up top here, you can see it running up along the duct. And basically, I just go up and inside the corner of this rear vent. so it keeps it up and underneath the overhang there, so I don't have to worry about rain or storm coming in. And it works pretty well. As far as power is concerned, I know I've showed you this before, but this is the power coming out of the trailer. Over here, it runs up and connects to the tent, so this is the one that supplies power to the tent's winch, the interior lights and fan. And then I've got this second one coming down here, and this is the one that now runs down to the heater. So the air intake in this orientation is down here. That's it there underneath. So I've got both gates open, the intake gate and the outflow gate. I've got the box closed and I'm ready to go. So let's go up in the tent. And let me show you what we have up here. Okay. So here's how I set it up when I'm running it. Now obviously all of the doors and screens would be closed, but you can see up here it's a pretty tight closure around this. It does a pretty good job. I haven't had any problems with bugs coming in, especially considering the fact that the times I use this, it's usually too cold for bugs anyway. So here I just have an open duct. I need to trim off a little bit of this extra wire so I don't catch myself on it someday. Alright, so the way this works, we're just going to push the button here. You can tell how often I use this, can't you? There we go. Okay, so it's going to run a quick check, make sure the heater's working properly. So that was a cycle of just the fans. Just a little bit of air coming out up here. Let me take you back down near the bottom so I can show you what that looks like. Hear the clicking? That's the fuel pump. Which you can see mounted up over there in the corner. And close this, give you an idea of what it's like with it closed. So that's what it sounds like. Now the combustion burner is starting to fire up. Got a little exhaust starting to come out. Okay, I know this isn't a proper test because it's the middle of summer out here, but this is what it's like when it's running full bore. This is the amount of noise you get down here at the unit. I want to show you so about halfway up I'm going to compare there's the temperature on the outside of the tubing compared to temperature on the cover. Now I know black versus gray, but this hasn't been out here very long, so it's actually able to do a pretty good job with this. So let me go back up in the tent and I'll show you what it's like from inside when it's running. Again, keep in mind that I do have all the screens open. Yep, that's definitely warm. Okay. So that's the inside of the duct, the air coming out. 122, 119 Fahrenheit. Now obviously it's cooler than that when it's not summertime, but this is still very warm air, and in fact, just based on the way it feels here, it's very close to this temperature even when it's significantly colder out. Now this is a slightly insulated duct, that's why you can see the reflectix on the inside here. But obviously it's not a heavily insulated one, and it's a pretty long duct as well. So let me show you what we have down here. So right now you can see, let me make sure you can see. There we go. Yeah, so it's set at just about 50%. So what I can do is lower this down. Now it's on its lowest setting. So in a second here, it's going to power down. Now it won't shut off completely, but it'll use a lot less fuel, and the blowers will slow down quite a bit. What I find, I can sleep in this tent with my blanket here and regular sheets, and I don't have to worry about getting cold at all with this setup in here. So what does it smell like to use one of these? Well, because I have the heater sitting right underneath where the tent is, there's a little bit of the exhaust that gets through the zippers, and obviously right now everything's open, so even more is getting through. But typically in the middle of winter, when everything's closed up here, I can smell a little bit of diesel exhaust right when it fires up, and that's about it. After that, it doesn't seem to have any smell to it at all. There you can hear the fan starting to slow down a little bit. But it works out really nicely. I think if I ever use a ground-mounted tent, something that has the ability to put a duct into it, if I'm not running a wood stove, I may consider bringing this along and using it. It doesn't draw a whole lot of power either. I've never actually hooked it up to a meter to see how much power it draws, but I've never had an issue with the battery on the Cherokee or the batteries in the trailer being able to keep up with it for an extended period of time. I think you can see that. We're still running around 130 something degrees. And the fans are quieting down quite a bit now. So this works really well when temperature's all the way down to, I would say, about a little below 20 Fahrenheit. As it gets down below the teens, down into closer to 10 and single digits, then I do like turning it up a little bit. The problem I've noticed is if I turn up the power rating too much on this, then it will start cycling, where it'll run for a while and then shut off. And I think that has something to do with the box I mounted it in. I think in that situation, even with cold weather, the heater's actually getting too warm inside the box and shutting itself off for safety purposes. So maybe that kind of a box with that kind of sound deadening insulation isn't necessarily the best choice, but it does make it nice and portable. So I don't know if you can hear that now. That's what it's like on its lowest setting. So now what we do when we want to turn it off is press and release. It'll go into a shutdown mode. Basically now what it's going to do is continue blowing air through. It'll let the burner shut down. It's turned off fuel to the system. And then in a second, it's going to fire up the blowers a little bit just to make sure that everything's cleared out of the combustion chamber. Well, now we're shut down. .93 Fahrenheit in the inside of the duct, so we're back to ambient temperature. Again, this technique seems to work pretty well. One of these days I need to figure out a way to mount it a little closer to the tent, just figuring that the shorter I can make that duct, the more efficient I can make this thing. And if I had the ability to put an intake duct maybe over in this screen somewhere, it might improve things even more. So we'll have to see. I'm going to keep playing with this, but so far it's worked pretty well just as a fresh air introducer. And there's enough air leakage in the tent that it doesn't cause any problems there. We have places around here where the lines that connect to the awning outside go through the material, and for some reason I'm not finding them at the moment, but I know they're in here. Got a couple down along here, you can see. There we go, there's one. So there's some in these corners here as well where the lines go through. So it works really well. It allows enough airflow to get through that it doesn't cause any problems, and I can keep the tent pretty warm. Obviously there's a little bit of insulation in the ceiling up here just by means of this headliner that they have, and there's a little bit of insulation down here because of the mattress and the other insulating pieces I've got down here. But obviously this is all just canvas all the way around. So it's definitely not the most efficient structure to try to heat. But even with that, this is one of their pretty low-end output models. But this tent does a really good job. Sorry, this heater does a really good job of keeping the tent warm, well down to temperatures that I wouldn't normally want to tent camp in without a sleeping bag. So let's get this turned off for you. There we go. Thanks for coming along on this introduction to the heater that I built and showing you how it works. Like I said, I'll keep working on it and eventually we'll get it right. But until then, I'll see you over the next horizon.